Greetings and welcome to From the Basement. In this video we're going to take a look at the tree and flower tools. But before I do that, I want to go ahead and get this square here banged into a little bit better shape. I'm going to kind of do an island scene here, so I'm going to set my height to 40. I'm going to grab one of the fuzzy brushes, make sure its size is nice and high, and not quite max opacity. I want to have at least a little bit of a chance to have some jaggies. And I'm just going to go through here and maybe crank my opacity down a little bit more. Create a small little island here with maybe a little bit of a center mountain here. Yeah, something nice and simple real quick here. And then do a light smooth on this so things aren't quite so pointed. There we go. Now, water we will deal with on a future video, but that leaves this island pretty well set up for dropping in some water, because again, that 10-meter height difference is a pretty steep difference, so we'll be able to get some good ocean line going there. And as again, it's just a real quick review. Let's see, I'm going to go to my tool here. I'm going to add in a cliff texture. Let's go with mossy, cliff grassy. And I'm also going to add in a sand. Let's see, I should have a sand in here. Yes, I do. Here we go, beach sand with pebbles. That sounds good. And I'm just going to real quick paint down the edges. And it's not a super good quality job right now, but it gets close enough. And there's a reason I want to talk about this right now. Close enough kind of almost has to be your mantra when it comes to dealing with terrains, because there is a lot that can go wrong. I might get halfway through this and decide that, you know what, this idea was really bad, or this mountain doesn't work good here. All sorts of possibilities that might cause me to say, oops, now this was a bad idea and I need to change. And so it's just a good idea to just go for good enough to get target opacity. That's what's going wrong. Now, to get it good enough so that way you have a rough feel for how things are going, but you haven't wasted a bunch of time, so that if you end up having to redo everything, it's not a massive loss of time. Detailing can be a very deep rabbit hole. You can spend hours trying to detail something only to find out in minutes when you hop in to try to play test it that the placement of that rock is horrible, or that ramp that you thought was perfect isn't, and all that detailing work is just going to be destroyed when you go in and resculpt. So you always want to leave the fine detailing work for last, but you still want to give, enough of a view that you can tell, okay, well, what is this going to look like in general? So that is what I have done here. All right, now back to our original purpose, trees. So we come over here to the tree tool. We have a whole bunch of different settings, and things change a little bit. One thing that hasn't changed, though, is like the textures, we need to add our trees in. So I'm going to go to Edit Trees, Add Tree. Got our little circle here. Now it will let you add in non-tree models as trees. Do not succumb to this temptation. It is a bad idea. You don't want to try to add in cars or balls or capsules or anything like that as trees. For one, sometimes Unity likes to crash when you do something crazy like that, and 2, other than the initial giggles you might get from it, it really doesn't look good. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the alder tree. It's kind of one of my favorite go-to trees here. I'm going to grab that tree, add it in, and then same controls as before. I've got brush size, only got a circle brush this time, and if I click, I get trees. Now, the tree placement tool does not care about slope. So as you notice, I have got trees like trying to grow on this vertical wall surface here, which just really doesn't work out all that great. You'll also notice this odd little popping thing that the trees are doing. And that is when the trees billboard. From a certain distance out, the trees switch from being 3D models to flat planes with a picture on it, because you can't see the difference anyways. The problem is that the default distance is so close, you see them do the pop into 3D models, and it just looks horrible. It's like they're pulsing little trees. Now, you can fix this by going into your settings, and where it says billboard start, see how that's set to 50? If I increase that to 250, then I have to get 250 meters away before they pop. And I can still see it a little bit, but it's a lot less noticeable now. Okay, so getting back to dealing with placement. Hop back over here to the trees. Now, I don't want these trees in the mountain, so I'm just going to go ahead, and it tells you here, Shift to erase trees, Control to erase the selected tree type. We've only got one tree. We'll show the control version later. So hold down Shift. And make sure I get all those trees up. Now let's take a look at the settings here. Brush size does what it sounds like. It controls how big the brush size is for putting down the trees. Tree density determines what is the maximum tree density that I can have. It's set to 83. So at most it'll put down 83 trees here before it says, okay, enough is enough. I don't need any more trees here. Oops. So say if I crank this down to say 16 trees, notice that tree density is of course a lot less. And if I crank it all the way up to 100 trees, yeah, instant jungle. I keep going one far too far. All right. Now there's a couple of ways you can manipulate this. One is you can try to manipulate your tree density, but tree density is never going to go down below 10. So you're always going to at least have that tree density of 10. Since I convince all of my trees to disappear without me releasing the shift button too soon. Now, if you want to really precisely control your trees, the best way of doing that is changing your brush size down to 1, and that will allow you to place one tree at a time. Okay, so what are some of our other options here? We have color variation. How much is the color going to vary? I'm going to crank this up to 1. And we might not be able to see much of a difference on these models. Actually, it looks like that completely broke the lighting model on this. See how it's some of these trees are light, some of these trees are super dark. Whereas if I change the color variation to a very low value, they're all the same shade, as opposed to getting these super dark trees. That's basically what color variation does. Exactly how that behaves is going to change from tree to tree. Tree height is, again, how tall the tree. So if I increase this to, say, 200, you notice the tree is, well, it's stretched. It looks like it got stretched. The variation says how much of a percentage variation do I want in this. So if I crank this up to 30, you can see how much of a variation I have in the trees there. Same thing with tree width. Again, you got to be careful with making these values too large, because all this is doing is stretching the trees and not necessarily scaling them very well. So, but that controls how you put down the trees. And of course, if I wanted to have multiple trees, I could come over here and let's see here, edit trees, add in another tree, and say maybe grab this bamboo. I like the bamboo, it's a cool one. Add, make sure I'm on the bamboo, and great little bamboo forest. Now there is one more tool, and that is the Mass Place Trees option. I'm going to go ahead and erase all my trees here so we can see this. Now Mass Place Trees works on all trees that you have added into the tool. So I'm going to add in one more tree here, add tree. Should have a sycamore. Here we go, here's a sycamore. So I've got these 3 trees. I'm going to click on Mass Place Trees, and basically what this is going to do is it's going to place this number of trees on the selected terrain. As you can see, with such a small terrain, 10,000 trees is a little bit much. Now when you do Mass Place Trees, it does thankfully take into some consideration the slope of the terrain. You notice that the mountain is empty of trees. It will not place the trees on the mountain. Of course, it probably wants something a little bit less drastic than that, so let's just put down 200 trees. And there you go. Now it's not going to care about height. All of these trees down here in the sand area are going to be underwater. Mass Place does not care. If it's a flat enough surface, it will put the tree there. And it's up to you to go back, if you don't want all of these guys, and get rid of them. And to show off the tools for erasing specific trees, put down a few sycamores, put down a few bamboos, and now if I do a control left click, notice I'm only erasing the bamboo trees out of there because that's the one I have selected. I select my sycamore, and I only erase my sycamores, leaving this one lone alder alone. Okay, moving on from that, we have details. Now, details can be really kind of a pain to work with, to be perfectly honest. But what we do is edit, and I'm just going to look at grass details. Getting detail meshes to work correctly is really kind of headache-inducing. It's best just to stick with the grasses. So we're going to add in a grass. And what we want to do is we want to select a grass billboard. So we're going to take a look here, and we've got this nice grass billboard PSD here that we can use. We want to look for things like this, or these fins here, or this bush. Something that looks like it's supposed to be used as a billboard. So I'm going to choose these grasses, add it in. Now, the detail distance is usually very low. If we go over to our settings, detail distance is set to 80. I want to increase that up to its max of 250 so that way I can see things better in the editor. Come back over here. I'm going to increase my brush size. Click once and whammo! Solid patch of grass. The detail tool is really twitchy about how fast it puts down the grass. I mean, literally, that is one click. Single mouse click, and I have got a stupid amount of grass down. Now we can control this a little bit with our opacity. And notice even with my opacity turned down, I'm still with just single clicks putting down a lot of these meshes. I can also control this by cranking down my size and by really pulling down my target strength. Of course, I can still, if I mouse over it, get quite a dense thing put on, but yeah, and then at least for this one too, we get our brushes back, so I can choose this scattered brush here, basically pull everything down super far, and then very carefully click, maybe with the occasional little drag of the mouse to try and get little tufts of grass placed in. It can be really super tricky to get this to not just totally overload things. And again, this tool does not care about vertical heights. I can come over here to this near vertical wall surface here, and it will quite happily try and paint grass on it. And that's pretty much it as far as this tool goes. And again, this is a detailing stage. I would not, oops, and I just completely spaz out there with my mouse control. But like I said, this is a detailing, and you notice I can't see where my grass is right now. I am too far away. Ah, there it is. But once I get so far out, I can't see it anymore. It won't show up until I get close enough. But putting down grass is a detailing step. I definitely would not fool with this until you're basically, you know, you're not going to be changing anything, because otherwise you're just going to have to come back through and redo this later. And actually, I'm going to add here. Let's add a grass texture. Add in some ferns. And add in a grass texture. There should be some flowers in here someplace. Here we go, white flowers. And there we go. All right, and that pretty much wraps up the bare bones basics of the terrain tools. There's certainly a lot more depth here that you can go into, but this is the bare bone basics of what you need to actually get a terrain up and running. And so the next video is going to be taking a look at, okay, well, how can I take this to the next level? I mean, what we have here is okay. I mean, you look at terrains that the pros create, and you look at how much effort you're going to have to go through to try to do that with these tools, and you're like, wow, that's really hard. Well, it is really hard, but there's some additional tools that we can use to make this a little bit easier, and that's what we're going to go over in the next video. And so, until then.